His first million didn't come with a thank you, not to the woman who stayed through the bank rejections, not to the woman who co-signed every risky deal. She didn't ask for praise. But when he gave that first raise to his assistant instead of his wife, she started watching. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, where we tell real American stories packed with heart, dignity, and powerful life lessons. Have you ever helped build someone's future, only to be erased from it once it bloomed? If you've seen someone change when power shows up, stay with us. And if you believe quiet strength speaks louder than ego, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get into it. Naima Carrington met Ellis Granger when he still believed in handwritten proposals and cheap wine. She was working part-time at a co-op grocery in Atlanta while studying logistics and finance at night. He was pitching his idea for a boutique hotel chain out of the back corner of a shared WeWork office. Their first date was really a budget meeting. Naima brought her own notebook and asked about overhead costs. Ellis thought she was beautiful, but it was her brain that stunned him. She asked questions no investor had. She believed in his idea more than he believed in himself. They made an odd but electric pair. He was ambition on fire, and she was focus in human form. He had the charm. She had the plan. He called her the system. She rolled her eyes but stayed late every night, revising projections, writing emails under his name, checking for loopholes in contracts. They were broke, in love, and unshakable. Their first hotel was a rundown roadside lodge with 3 working bathrooms and 5 leaking ceilings. Naima helped him rebrand it into a wellness retreat using borrowed plants, fresh paint, and an insane social media strategy she built off free marketing courses. They slept on a mattress in the back office and took showers during off-peak hours to save water. When Ellis landed his first angel investor, it wasn't from a pitch. It was from a client who stayed at that very lodge and noticed the systems, Naima's systems. That $500,000 changed their lives. Ellis proposed in the staff room 2 days later, with a vending machine ring. Naima said yes while sorting payroll. They laughed, they kissed, and they got back to work. They were partners, real ones, and for a while, it worked. The empire grew slowly at first, then all at once. More investors, more properties, more interviews, more staff. But somewhere between Hotel 5 and Hotel 15, Ellis started showing up to meetings with a personal stylist. He stopped asking Naima to proofread his investor pitches. He hired a communications consultant instead. The ring from the vending machine was replaced with a Cartier band, then left forgotten in a drawer. Naima didn't say anything. She still ran operations. She still answered emergency vendor calls at 2 a.m. She still balanced numbers when Ellis overspent on art for the lobby in Boston. She believed in loyalty, even when it stopped believing in her. Ellis became someone people wanted to take pictures with. Naima became someone people assumed was just another executive. He started saying "I" instead of "we" in interviews. She still kept his schedule tight, his team accountable, and his properties profitable. But she noticed something else too. He started needing more applause. He lived for likes, mentions, and whispers of admiration in exclusive lounges. Naima didn't crave any of it. She liked knowing things worked because she built them right, not because someone clapped. And maybe that's where the space began to grow. He hired a new executive assistant during the expansion to Miami. Young, polished, always laughing too hard at his jokes. Naima didn't flinch. She welcomed her, trained her, told her which vendors to never mess with and which emails required instant response. But when Ellis began arriving late to meetings Naima used to attend with him, when he started staying in Miami an extra night, always citing unexpected board calls, Naima paid attention. She didn't accuse. She made copies. She downloaded every signed deed. She checked every ownership document he'd once added her to, and found 3 where her name had accidentally been left off. She didn't ask questions. She just updated her folder. One night, Naima returned from a vendor walkthrough at the new Scottsdale property and stopped by the penthouse suite in Chicago. Ellis wasn't expecting her. There were 2 champagne flutes on the marble kitchen island. One had lipstick on it. His assistant's coat was draped over the back of the couch. Ellis came out of the bedroom, shirt undone. He froze, blinked. Once. Naima didn't raise her voice. She set her bag down, walked to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and said calmly, "There's a maintenance issue in the rooftop spa, and it's leaking into the floors below. The vendor is sending someone at 6 a.m. You'll need to clear this place before then." He stammered. "Naima, wait, this isn't—" She picked up her bag. "I'll send the file," and she left. That night, she didn't cry. She updated her document copies, booked herself a spa room on a personal card, drank peppermint tea and read a chapter of a book on family trusts. The next morning she called her attorney. Not for confrontation, for preparation. Naima didn't rush. That had never been her style. After finalizing the maintenance issue at the rooftop spa, she drove to a quiet law firm in the Gold Coast district. No cameras, no luxury glass walls, just a solid, discreet office where things got handled without noise. The attorney listened, then leaned back and said, "We'll prepare options for dissolution and full financial protection." Naima nodded. "Make sure the lake house comes to me." He used my name to secure the loan. She had the paperwork to prove it. She'd kept it all. Back home, Ellis tried to do what he'd always done, overcorrect through distraction. He showed up to Naima's team meeting uninvited, brought flowers she was allergic to, and offered to reset things with a surprise weekend in Dubai. Naima declined, not with anger, just with stillness. "Handle your trip alone," she said. "I've got payroll reviews and vendor conflicts on 3 properties. You'll be fine." She didn't bring up the lipstick, or the champagne, or the fact that her assistant confirmed the Miami assistant never clocked out the night before. She didn't need to. Ellis didn't understand silence. It made him feel exposed. Naima's quiet unnerved him more than yelling ever could. He kept expecting her to break, to scream, to accuse. She never did. She simply moved with more clarity. Her calendar shifted. Her tone turned clinical. She reviewed asset lists like a forensic accountant instead of a wife. She had been his stability. Now she was his mirror. And Ellis didn't like what he saw reflected. One evening, Ellis found her alone in the kitchen reviewing contracts. He leaned on the doorway. "You've been cold lately." She didn't look up. "No. I've just been clear." "Clear about what?" "That I'm no longer in something I need to explain or defend." He shifted, folding his arms. "So, that's it?" She finally looked at him. "Do you want a performance, Ellis? Is that how you recognize pain? If it's loud enough to get you sympathy?" He blinked. The words didn't just land. They shattered something. 2 days later, she sent her attorney's draft to his inbox. No press, no media leaks, no warning. He called her immediately. "You're divorcing me?" "I already did," she said. "This is just the paperwork. You didn't even ask for a conversation. You didn't either. Not when you hired her. Not when you left me alone at my father's funeral arrangements. Not when you moved assets without my name on them." Silence. "Ellis," she added softly, "I didn't walk out of a marriage. I walked back into myself." She signed quietly. In a private notary's office near the marina. No entourage. No dramatic texts. No photo ops. And when she was done, she went to her father's grave and placed a fresh cup of hot tea by the headstone. "I kept my promise, Daddy. I stayed dignified." She sat there for an hour, breathing in the winter air. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Ellis, his lawyer, their PR handler. She turned the phone off. Some things don't deserve a reply. That evening, her best friend Sanai called. "Girl, you want me to drag him on social media? I'll go full savage. I'll get those screenshots trending." Naima smiled. "No. If I wanted noise, I would have married a microphone." Sanai paused, then whispered, "Naima, you're colder than ice right now, and I love it." "It's not cold," she said, sipping tea. "It's clarity." That night, she lit a candle and wrote down what she wanted for her next chapter. No men who needed validation through conquest, no partners who loved her in silence, and betrayed her in secret. No stages, no applause, just peace, purpose, truth. She didn't want revenge. She wanted alignment. And the beauty of quiet strength is that it never needs to prove itself. By the next morning, Ellis had launched a PR campaign to make it seem like the split was mutual. Naima said nothing, but every woman on her team noticed her ring was gone, and her spine had never stood straighter. If this chapter made you think about quiet strength, type quiet power in the comments. Like this video if you believe dignity speaks louder than noise. Share this story with someone building in silence. And subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more real stories with meaning, growth and lessons you can carry into your own life. There's a certain kind of man who remembers who he was when he had nothing. And there's another who rewrites history the second money shows up. Ellis didn't forget Naima. He simply decided the version of her that helped him build wasn't glossy enough for the brand he was becoming. Naima watched the shift happen slowly, like water leaking through drywall. At first it was harmless like compliments thrown toward strangers while ignoring the person who helped build your name. The first big check came from an overseas investor, a developer in Singapore who wanted Ellis's brand in 2 properties off the coast. The man had loved Ellis's charisma, but he had trusted Naima's analytics. Naima negotiated the deal. She read the fine print. She warned Ellis about the hidden clause. He ignored her advice. Signed anyway. Posed for the cameras. Said the usual lines. "We're expanding thanks to my team and my vision." Naima didn't flinch. She didn't clap either. After that deal, Ellis changed. He upgraded his wardrobe, no longer off-the-rack suits, but custom Italian tailoring. He started arriving late to meetings, then calling in from somewhere more strategic. He posted photos with captions like, "Hustle never sleeps. Surround yourself with killers. They laughed at my dreams until I bought the building." Naima, who had once written their entire first pitch deck at 2 a.m. on a shared Google Doc, was no longer tagged in anything. At a regional board retreat in Denver, Naima noticed something else. Ellis gave a 40-minute keynote about scaling from 0 to 40 properties. He mentioned his mentor, his new CFO, even the marketing intern who built a TikTok reel that went viral. He didn't mention her. She was in the audience, watching, sitting beside one of their oldest investors, a quiet man named Mr. Levins. Mr. Levins leaned over mid-speech and asked, "Why is your name not on that slide?" Naima smiled. "You'd have to ask his stylist." Levins raised a brow, then nodded. "You built this with him. I remember the old days. He never used to speak without checking with you first." Naima's eyes didn't move from the stage. People get addicted to being clapped for, especially when they forget who helped them stand. After the speech, Ellis posed for photos with a few board members. His assistant, yes, the same one with the champagne lipstick, stood nearby with a fresh comb and makeup blotting papers. She laughed too hard again, touched his arm again, used words like power move and icon energy. Naima excused herself and walked out to the balcony. The mountains were quiet. The air smelled like pine and frost. She leaned on the railing and closed her eyes. This was the moment she realized she wasn't jealous. She was done. Not with love, not even with Ellis. She was done being edited out of the legacy she helped build. 2 days later, Ellis posted a video. He stood on the balcony of a luxury suite in Los Angeles, holding a drink. Caption, self-made, legacy built, #the grind continues. Naima didn't say a word. She just took a screenshot and saved it in a folder titled Rebranding Alone. At a quarterly investor dinner, Ellis arrived in a navy velvet tuxedo, 3 assistants trailing behind him. Naima, in a simple black sheath dress and a low bun, sat across from him at the main table. The lead investor opened his toast with, "To Ellis and Naima, the original duo." Ellis laughed awkwardly. "Oh, she just keeps us grounded." Naima raised her glass slightly. "And solvent." The room chuckled, but the edge in her voice wasn't missed. After dessert, Ellis leaned over. "What's that supposed to mean?" She looked him dead in the eye. It means if I ever leave, make sure your accountant is ready. Ellis blinked. Naima stood, adjusted her dress, and said with a soft smile, "Enjoy your claps, Ellis. I'll be in the spreadsheet." That night, she received an email from a former property manager. The woman had been pushed out 6 months earlier after she flagged an ethics concern involving Ellis's assistant and a suspicious contract award. The email was short. "If you ever need a statement, I kept copies. People think your silence is ignorance. I know better." Naima closed her laptop. She made herself peppermint tea and began drafting a backup financial protection plan. 3 weeks after that investor dinner, Ellis sat down with a luxury magazine for a full spread. They titled "The Peace, Vision, Victory, and the Man Behind the Empire." Naima wasn't mentioned once. Not as co-founder, not as not even as his wife. She only found out about the article because the assistant posted a behind-the-scenes photo on her story, captioned "Boss Energy." She was holding Ellis's tie. Naima read the article quietly on her tablet while sitting in the Chicago property's lobby, across from a nervous intern waiting to interview for a full-time role. The intern looked up from her notes and asked, "Are you nervous about your review meeting too?" Naima smiled. "I'll be the one reviewing you." The intern blinked, wide-eyed. Naima slid the tablet into her tote and stood. "Come on, let's talk about your ideas. We hire for brains, not just smiles." She meant it, even as her husband's assistant smiled for cameras that didn't know the real foundation behind the brand. That night, Naima didn't bring up the article to Ellis. She didn't question him. She didn't post a rebuttal. She did, however, meet with her accountant, and for the first time, she asked the hard question. "What does it look like if I remove myself from every shared entity by the end of the fiscal year?" Her accountant hesitated. "Do you want to sell your shares?" "No," she said. "I want to be protected from the storm I know is coming." In public, Ellis was thriving. On camera, on panels, on podcasts. Behind the scenes, cracks were forming. One of the Miami properties had its permits revoked. A quiet lawsuit was filed by a silent partner Ellis had ignored. Naima caught the inconsistencies first. A margin misreport, a supplier who hadn't been paid in full, and a fabricated customer review campaign led by a third-party contractor, recommended by his assistant. She brought it to Ellis. He brushed it off. "Negative press is part of the game. I'll spin it." Naima replied, "I'm not in the business of spin. I'm in the business of truth." He rolled his eyes. "You're too dramatic. You're too sloppy," she said flatly, and left the room. The emotional weight hit her later, in the elevator, alone, not because he was reckless, but because he no longer trusted her. He trusted applause more than her voice. That wasn't business. That was betrayal. Back home, she made a quiet list. Freeze joint account contributions, revisit prenup clauses, list all shared properties, secure her father's farmland title. Update her will. She checked each one off over the next 10 days. No drama, no gossip, just quiet exit preparation. Then a moment came. Small, but unforgettable. Naima arrived at the Miami property unannounced during an operations audit. She walked into the executive lounge and saw Ellis, laughing, glass in hand. The assistant seated beside him, too close, her hand resting on his thigh. He didn't notice Naima for a full 8 seconds. When he finally looked up, he froze. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She nodded once, then said to the assistant, "You'll need to submit your fourth quarter reports by tomorrow. I flagged several misalignments," and walked out. The next day, Ellis texted, "Are we going to talk about what you saw?" Naima replied, "I saw what I needed. No discussion necessary. Lesson embedded. Not all betrayal needs a war. Some wounds only require the truth and distance." Ellis spiraled for days trying to get ahead of the narrative. Naima didn't post a thing, but people started noticing the shift. She stopped attending launches. She stopped being mentioned in company-wide emails. She stopped being seen at Ellis's side. But she didn't disappear. She was simply positioning herself where she could no longer be misused. Late one night, her old mentor emailed her a quote that would stay with her. "Some women carry empires in silence, and when they leave, men confuse the fall with bad luck." Naima saved that quote as her phone wallpaper. 1 week later, she was invited to speak on a private panel for women founders. She declined the media invitation, but she showed up in a steel grey suit, no makeup, hair tied back, no entourage, no flash, just presence. And when asked why she hadn't left her husband yet, she smiled gently and said, "I stopped being married a long time ago. I'm just waiting for the papers to catch up." The lipstick didn't scream. It whispered, and Naima heard it clearly. It was a shade she would never wear. Too bright, too loud. The kind of color meant to draw eyes and declare territory. Not her style, but it had shown up on the edge of a champagne flute left carelessly on the granite kitchen counter in their penthouse suite. Ellis wasn't home yet. Naima stood quietly at the entrance, her keys still in her hand. She took in the scene. 2 glasses, one with lipstick. A silk scarf she didn't own on the edge of the couch. The faintest trace of perfume in the air, something floral, synthetic, attention-hungry. She didn't raise her voice, didn't throw things, didn't touch the evidence. She walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, poured herself a glass of water, and sat on the stool by the island. Legs crossed. Calm. Still. Ellis walked in 3 minutes later. He stopped mid-step when he saw her. "Naima." She looked up. "There's a leak at the Westfield Spa. Contractors arrive at 6 a.m. I'll need you to move out of this unit by then." He blinked. "Wait, what?" She gestured toward the glass. "Tell your guest." He opened his mouth, then closed it, then tried again. "Naima, this is not—" "I'm not here to discuss this," she said evenly. "I'm here to handle operations. We're over budget and behind timeline. That's my priority." She stood, set her glass down, and walked out without another word. That night, she didn't break. She didn't call Sanai, didn't drown her rage in texts, didn't burn anything. Instead, she booted up her laptop and opened the secure folder she'd named months ago, Exit Blueprint. Inside were scanned copies of every deed Ellis had accidentally removed her name from, every business account she'd helped open, every contract she'd co-signed, and every equity split she'd negotiated in his favor. She updated 2 files, labeled them with new dates, rechecked legal references. Then she closed the laptop and made herself peppermint tea. Naima understood the value of reaction. That's why she didn't give him one. Because Ellis fed off emotion, he twisted it, flipped it, repainted himself as the victim of her coldness. She'd watched him do it to old partners, angry clients, former friends. She wouldn't be next. So she chose precision. The next morning, she scheduled a quiet meeting with their business attorney under the guise of reviewing vendor contracts. In truth, she presented him with a list of amendments to remove her from shared liability on all risk-heavy ventures. The attorney, startled, asked, "Naima, are you planning to dissolve the joint operations?" She answered without hesitation, "No, I'm planning to survive what's coming." Later that day, she entered a quarterly leadership meeting wearing a tailored cream suit, her curls pinned into a low knot. She took her seat, silent, direct, in control. Ellis arrived late, unshaved, distracted, overconfident. He sat beside her, nodded slightly. "We good?" Naima glanced at him once. "We're functioning." That was the only reply he got. During the meeting, his assistant, the one with the lipstick, presented a slide deck. Messy, disorganized, full of buzzwords with no substance. Naima asked a single question: "Where's the financial breakdown that supports the projected ROI on slide 8? The assistant stammered, looked to Ellis for help. He tried to deflect with charm. "Naima, we don't need to get into the weeds right now." Naima folded her hands. "Ellis, that slide implies a $3.5 million projection. If we're skipping the weeds, then we're not planting anything that'll grow." Silence fell across the room. The CFO coughed softly. We should probably pull up the numbers. Naima didn't smile. She waited. The assistant looked pale. After the meeting, Ellis followed her out. You didn't have to embarrass her. Naima didn't stop walking. She embarrassed herself by showing up unprepared. He grabbed her elbow gently. You're acting like... She pulled her arm free. Like someone who's tired of watching your mess cost everyone else money. His jaw clenched. Naima leaned in close, her voice low. The lipstick didn't break us. Your decisions did. She walked away. He didn't follow. That night, she went to her father's old house, the small one in Marietta with chipped blue paint and a broken porch light. She had kept it all these years. Quietly paid the taxes. Refused to flip it or renovate it into something trendy. Inside was a desk he had built with his bare hands. Naima sat there, lit a small lamp, and pulled out her journal. She wrote, Do not let loud people erase your quiet work. Do not defend truth to someone who profits from confusion. Do not apologize for walking away silently. By morning, she had made a decision. It wasn't time to file yet, but it was time to take her name off every account he didn't protect. She spent the next 2 weeks restructuring her visibility. She stepped back from photo ops, handed media relations to someone else, showed up only for operations and decision-making. The staff started whispering, Is something wrong with Mr. and Mrs. Granger? Have you noticed she's colder? She doesn't even wear her ring anymore. But she wasn't cold. She was done performing. Sanai came over one night with wine and a sleeping bag. I'm not leaving until you let me throw one punch or one tweet. Naima laughed. There's no need. But girl, you found lipstick, champagne, the giggle bot. You should have flipped the whole penthouse. Naima looked at her friend. Then what? Sanai blinked. What do you mean? After I flip the table, what changes? Does he become honest? Loyal? Protective? No, exactly. But now he gets to call me emotional, dangerous, petty. Sanai sighed. So, what's the play? Naima sipped her tea. I let him talk himself into a corner, and I document everything, because real strength isn't noise. It's knowing you don't have to fight for what you already know is true. Naima stopped attending strategy meetings in person. She started dialing in instead, camera off, voice even, notes precise. Ellis noticed. He texted her one night, We feel off. Can we talk? She replied, There's nothing unclear between us. You've made your position visible. I'm making mine official. He didn't respond. But 3 days later, he sent flowers. Peonies. Her favorite. The card said, You've always been the brain behind my brilliance. She placed them in the staff break room and returned to her office. When the assistant passed by, Naima didn't flinch. She looked up once and said, Be careful with someone who treats people like mirrors. Eventually, he'll break the one that shows him the truth. The assistant stared at her. Naima didn't wait for a reply. That weekend, she flew to New York for a women's investment roundtable. It wasn't publicized. She had started quietly building a capital group focused on backing women-led tech startups and community-based businesses. A few investors knew. A few founders had been approached. But no press, no noise. The room was full of power, unbranded, quiet, generational. She listened more than she spoke, took notes, asked smart questions, didn't name-drop her connection to Ellis once. At the end of the night, one of the elder women said to her, You lead like someone who's had to shrink herself in order to survive someone else's spotlight. Naima replied, Not anymore. Back in Chicago, Ellis was unraveling, subtly. He started noticing how many team members deferred to Naima, even in her absence. How vendors asked for her sign-off, not his. How operations slowed when she was unavailable. She didn't gloat. She simply moved with purpose. He threw a charity gala to reclaim attention, invited politicians, influencers, celebrities. She didn't attend. When asked why, she told the event planner, I don't attend rooms where people confuse branding for impact. The assistant arrived in a gold dress with a thigh-high slit. Ellis smiled for the cameras. But even the press noticed. Where's Mrs. Granger? She's always here. This isn't like her. Behind closed doors, Ellis sent Naima a message. "You're missing your own success story." She replied, "No, I'm rewriting it." The next week, her lawyer finalized the amendment paperwork. All shared business accounts were now marked with dual approval protocols. Her separate holdings were filed under a new trust, her father's initials embedded in the name. The lake house was being transferred officially. Her name was restored to every asset she built, and every loss, prone venture Ellis had taken without her, was being flagged. It wasn't war. It was protection. One night, Ellis came home to find Naima sitting in the living room with a stack of documents on the table. He looked at her warily. "What's all this?" She gestured calmly. "Inventory, financial audit, updated protocols." He raised an eyebrow. "You're auditing me?" "I'm auditing our life," she said. "Because if I'm going to leave, I'm leaving organized." Ellis's face froze. "What do you mean, leave?" Naima stood. "Ellis, you stopped loving me the day you stopped listening. You started competing instead of partnering. You chose ego. I'm choosing peace." He stepped forward. "You're being dramatic. Don't throw this away over misunderstandings." She met his eyes. "You're right. This isn't a misunderstanding. That's why I'm leaving." He didn't know what to say, because deep down, he thought she'd always stay. That quiet meant weak. That grace meant she needed him. But now she was speaking clearly, calmly, and it was terrifying. He tried again. "Look, I messed up, okay? But you're blowing this out of—" Naima cut in. "This isn't about the assistant, or the lipstick, or the magazine article. It's about the man you became when cameras started watching." Ellis clenched his jaw. "So what? You're walking out after everything we've built?" "I'm walking away to protect what I built, before you destroy it with your need to be clapped for." Lesson embedded. Not every loss is loud. Some losses come wrapped in documents and sealed with silence. And by the time you realize the damage, the person you dismissed has already rebuilt elsewhere. Naima left that night, not with a suitcase, just her phone, her documents, and her favorite mug. She drove to the lake house and sat on the porch as morning broke. The water was still. So was her heart. She whispered to herself, "You survived worse. You'll build better." The birds chirped. The sun rose slowly, and Naima made peppermint tea. There are moments that don't need yelling to break a heart. Sometimes, the betrayal doesn't come with lipstick or perfume. Sometimes, it comes with a silent hospital hallway, a cold phone screen, a lie that doesn't even pretend to care. Naima was alone in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and sorrow. Her father had been admitted 3 days earlier after a sudden stroke. She had barely slept, barely eaten. She spent her hours pacing between the ICU ward and the hospital chapel, checking machines, asking questions, calling her dad's old cardiologist in Atlanta for a second opinion. Ellis wasn't there. He was in Singapore, or so he said. The night before, Naima had texted him, "Doctors say he may not make it through the night. Please come." He didn't respond. Instead, at 8:13 p.m., she got a calendar alert from his shared inbox. Courtside, Lakers versus Knicks. Suite level 3. Naima stared at it for a full minute. Then she opened her browser. The tab loaded slowly on hospital Wi-Fi, but the image was clear. Ellis, courtside, smiling, and beside him, the assistant wearing a silver dress, laughing, not holding hands, not kissing, but close, too close, wrong kind of close. She didn't throw the phone. She didn't scream. She simply put it down and went back into the ICU to hold her father's hand. He passed at 4:47 a.m. Naima was there, alone, no cameras, no press, no silver dresses, just her and the man who raised her. After the doctor called time, she helped remove her father's wedding ring, packed his Bible, signed the necessary paperwork, and walked to the vending machine. The only thing available was orange soda. He hated orange soda. She bought it anyway and left it on the windowsill in his room. Her way of saying goodbye. Later that morning, A nurse offered to call someone for her. Naima smiled softly. No one's coming. The nurse touched her arm. Do you want to sit a while longer? I need to go handle an estate and a hotel chain, she replied. But thank you. The nurse blinked. Are you sure? Naima's eyes didn't flinch. I'm always sure. Back at the penthouse, Ellis was still in bed when she arrived. He didn't expect her that early. Didn't expect her at all. She walked in, saw the champagne glasses, a heel in the corner, her pillow missing from their bed. He stirred. Naima? She set a folded paper on the edge of the bed. The funeral is on Thursday, 11 a.m. He sat up slowly. Wait, your dad? She didn't answer, didn't even look at him. She turned and left. He called her twice that evening. She didn't pick up. The funeral came and went. He showed up, late, with sunglasses and a forced hug. Naima didn't break, not even when his hand tried to linger in hers as they walked out. She stepped aside. That night, she went to her father's study and unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was the last letter he'd written her. She'd found it a year earlier, but never opened it. Now she did. Naima, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But you've always known what to do, even when people didn't see it. Don't stay quiet to be kept. Don't shrink for someone who builds ego, not partnership. And if they ever put someone else beside them when you needed them most, leave, even if it's quiet, especially if it's quiet. I love you, Dad. She folded the letter and placed it in her bag. Her decision was made. Lesson embedded. Some betrayals are about more than love. They're about absence. They're about who stands beside you when the rest of the world blurs. And when the answer is no one, that's all the answer you need. The next morning, Naima filed for divorce. No warning, no confrontation. She gave instructions to her legal team, transferred key assets into trust, locked all financial activity that didn't have dual consent. She cancelled the assistant's corporate card, sent the legal documents to Ellis's inbox with the subject line signed, Naima. She didn't need him to be angry. She didn't need him to beg. She didn't need anything from him anymore. But Ellis did call, 14 times. He texted, "This is extreme. We can talk. You're overreacting. Don't do something you'll regret." She responded once. "I already did. I married you." She made peppermint tea, packed 2 suitcases, and left for the lake house. The lake house had always been hers, even when Ellis put his name first on the deed, even when his assistant threw a summer staff retreat there without asking, even when she found invoices for catering events she didn't authorize. It sat on 5 acres of wooded land outside of Asheville, with no neighbors in sight. The kind of place where birds woke you up and the wind sounded like peace. Naima hadn't been there in 6 months. But the moment she stepped inside, it welcomed her like she had never left. She lit the fireplace, turned off her phone, and sat on the back deck, wrapped in one of her father's old flannel jackets. The stars didn't care about lawsuits or lies. The trees didn't whisper rumors. The sky didn't ask her to stay and smile. It just let her be. For the first time in months, Naima let the stillness hold her. And then she cried. Quietly, into her hands, into the air, not from heartbreak, from release. The next morning, her lawyer emailed a scanned copy of the filed divorce documents, all paperwork submitted, waiting on Ellis's counsel to respond. She replied, "Keep everything quiet, no media, no leaks." She made a promise to herself that day, this would not become a circus. She wouldn't let anyone turn her pain into clickbait. Back in Chicago, Ellis panicked. Not publicly. He still smiled for cameras and shook hands with donors. But behind closed doors, he was spiraling. His assistant noticed first the way he snapped at staff, the way he forgot names, the way he avoided his phone like it burned. When he finally told her about the divorce, she blinked. "She filed without telling you." She didn't need to tell me. She just did it. The assistant tried to offer comfort, but Ellis wasn't looking for comfort. He was looking for control. And Naima had taken it all with one silent signature. He called Sanai next. Bad move. She answered on speaker. What do you want, Ellis? I just want to talk to her. One conversation. You had years of conversations, Sanai snapped. You used them to lie or ignore. That window's closed. He sighed. Look, I know I messed up, but she can't throw it all away. Sanai paused. Ellis, you weren't thrown away. You were released. Click. Naima, meanwhile, wasn't sitting idle. She spent the next week organizing, digitizing old files, backing up financial records, creating a mentorship packet for a scholarship program she'd quietly launched under her father's name. She wrote emails to young women founders she had promised to fund. She met with a builder about turning part of the lake house into a retreat space for women leaving high-stress marriages. She wasn't running. She was rebuilding. And it felt good. One evening, she sat on the dock with her feet in the water and her journal in her lap. She wrote, You don't owe anyone a loud goodbye. You owe yourself a quiet beginning. She closed the journal, and just as she did, her phone lit up. Unknown number. She ignored it. It rang again. Then came the text. Naima, please, one call. It was Ellis. She didn't respond that night. She didn't even read the full message. But she thought about it, not because she missed him, but because she was ready to say something she hadn't said before. You don't get to ask anything of me anymore. 2 days later, he emailed a formal response to the divorce papers. No contest, no objections. He signed everything. But in the final box where it asked for optional closing remarks, he wrote, I hope you find what I lost. Naima read the line 3 times, then deleted the email. Some words don't deserve space. Her lawyer called that afternoon. It's official. You're free. Naima walked to the kitchen, poured herself a cup of peppermint tea, looked out at the water, and whispered, Thank you. Lesson embedded. Sometimes, closure doesn't come from conversations. Sometimes it comes from courage. And the moment you stop waiting to be understood, you begin to understand yourself. Naima didn't post, didn't announce, didn't update her relationship status, but her silence echoed louder than Ellis's entire brand. And those who knew her, they knew peace looked good on her. No one believed it when the documents went through, not because Ellis Granger was faithful, but because Naima Carrington hadn't said a single word. No press release, no late-night Instagram post, no sources close to the couple planting rumors in entertainment blogs. It was like the divorce happened in silence, but for Naima, it had been loud for a long time, just not outside. Ellis kept waiting for the outburst, the confrontation, the teary plea, something to make him feel in control again. He got nothing, not even a returned call. And that's when it began to hit him. Not all power is loud. Naima's power lived in withdrawal, and it terrified him. She stayed at the lake house for 10 days after filing. She only communicated with her legal team and the small group of women she was mentoring. One of them, Shanice, a 24-year-old single mother pitching a mobile healthcare unit for underserved rural women, emailed her in tears after a pitch meeting fell flat. Naima scheduled a Zoom call from her back porch. She showed up in a hoodie, tea in hand, and said, You don't need everyone to clap. You just need one person to understand what you're building. Shanice replied, That's what you did for Ellis, huh? Naima paused, then said softly, Yes, until I realized he only clapped for himself. After that call, she sat on the porch longer than usual. A breeze moved through the trees. Her father's wind chimes swayed in rhythm. She pulled out her journal and wrote one sentence, I no longer negotiate with ego. Then she closed it and smiled. Back in Chicago, Ellis paced through the penthouse, furious with the silence. He had grown used to noise, praise, interviews, curated chaos. Naima had always been the one who managed the behind-the-scenes while he bathed in lights. Now, his assistant couldn't answer investor questions. The press was asking about her absence. The hotel group's stock had dipped, just slightly, but enough to catch attention. He called an emergency meeting. It didn't go well. The CFO asked why Naima's name was no longer listed on several corporate documents. Ellis fumbled. "She's taking a break." The room fell quiet. Because everyone knew Naima didn't take breaks. She took charge. He returned home and poured himself a drink. One of Naima's old books still sat on the shelf, Smart Growth Strategy for Regional Business. She had notes scribbled in the margins. He pulled it down and flipped through the pages. Every section she'd annotated had one underlying theme. Build steady. Build real. Build without needing to be seen. Ellis closed the book and felt the chill of absence. Meanwhile, Naima was closing other kinds of books. She finalized her personal trust and renamed it the Carrington Quiet Growth Fund. It was designed to invest in companies led by women who didn't fit the traditional mold, older, black, first-time founders, or from rural communities. No branding, no PR campaign, just action. Her attorney asked, "Would you like to link the fund to your marital name for recognition?" She shook her head. "No, I'm building under my name now, not the one I carried for his comfort." Sanai visited the lake house mid-week. She brought cupcakes and a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling cider. "Don't roll your eyes. This is your divorce party." Naima chuckled. "You're the only person I know who celebrates endings like birthdays." Sanai grinned. "Girl, this is a rebirth. You left a man who confused applause with intimacy. You deserve glitter." Naima smiled, but shook her head. "I don't need glitter. I need grounding." Sanai sat beside her. "You already are. But a little shimmer wouldn't kill you." They laughed, toasted with cider, and listened to Otis Redding on the deck until the stars came out. The next morning, Naima received a text. "Ellis, I know you're done talking, but just so you know, I signed everything. No contest. I hope you're okay." She read it twice, then deleted it. Because closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's the space left when you choose peace and never return to chaos. Later that week, she drove into town to visit the community center where her father used to volunteer. The director greeted her with a tight hug. "He talked about you every day, said you were his best investment." Naima blinked hard. "I'd like to donate something," she said, voice steady. Quietly. "To renovate the literacy wing. No name plaques. Just better lighting and new shelves." The director smiled. He would have loved that. That night, Ellis stared at his phone. He scrolled through old photos, trips, hotel openings, dinners. In nearly every one, Naima stood slightly to the side, clipboard in hand, making sure everything ran on time. He'd always thought she'd be there, no matter what. He thought wrong. He called his assistant in. "You ever have someone leave you and not say why?" She hesitated. "I think she did say why. You just didn't hear it." He stared out the window. Lesson embedded. Some goodbyes aren't slammed doors. They're rooms you walk out of quietly, because staying would require you to unlearn your worth. Naima lit a candle that evening, not for mourning, for peace. No fireworks, no applause, just the kind of quiet you earn when you choose yourself after being erased. And she whispered a truth only the stars heard. "This isn't the end. It's the beginning of me." A week after Ellis signed the papers, Naima returned to Chicago. Not to the penthouse, not to confront him. She returned for closure on her terms. Her car service dropped her off at the side entrance of their oldest hotel, downtown, the same one where they held the ribbon cutting 8 years ago. Back then, Ellis had made a speech about dreams, hustle, and love. He never mentioned the spreadsheets Naima worked on for 72 hours straight to secure the final inspection certificate. She walked in without fanfare. Her presence alone turned heads. Some smiled. Some avoided eye contact. One front desk intern whispered, "She's back." She met privately with the hotel's general manager, reviewed the Q3 financials, made 3 recommendations, approved a property upgrade for the staff lounge. Then she quietly walked the building's back halls, paths she knew like muscle memory. No cameras followed. No one took notes. Because this wasn't a performance. This was legacy maintenance. After her walk through, she stood alone in the staff kitchen and stared. At the dry erase board where team members left anonymous gratitude notes. Someone had written in black marker, to the woman who never needed applause but gave everyone else a stage, "Thank you." Naima smiled and blinked once. That was enough. She stepped back into the city like nothing had changed, wore dark glasses, carried her father's old briefcase instead of a designer tote, passed the boutiques and galleries without pause. No one recognized her, and she preferred it that way. She had a late lunch with a former board member who had quietly resigned the year before due to Ellis's ego creeping into business decisions. The woman said, "You were always the asset." He was the headline. Naima stirred her tea. And headlines fade. They clinked glasses, and the woman said, "If you ever want to build something new, I'd fund it." Naima smiled. "I already am." Later that night, she sat in a hotel suite, not the penthouse, and watched the lights of the city she had once tried to hold together. She turned off the lamp, opened her laptop, pulled up her investment dashboard. 5 women-led startups, 3 community grant projects, 2 microloan programs for single mothers launching home-based businesses. None of them knew she was behind the funding. That was intentional. She wasn't interested in being seen. She was interested in seeing others rise. Ellis, meanwhile, tried one last card. He sent a handwritten letter to the lake house. Inside it read, "Naima, you didn't even let me explain. I know I made mistakes. I know I took things for granted. But we were something once. Can we talk? No cameras, no pressure, just you and me. I miss the silence we used to share." Ellis. She folded the note and placed it in a drawer next to her father's letter. Then she lit a candle and let the moment pass. The next morning, she visited her new property, a brownstone she'd quietly purchased 2 months earlier under her own name. Not the LLC she shared with Ellis, not the family trust they used to co-own. This one was hers. She walked through the empty rooms barefoot, let her voice echo through the hallways. It wasn't just a house, it was proof that you can lose everything you thought you needed and still build something stronger. She turned the guest room into an office, hung no photos, just a single framed quote on the wall. "Quiet women don't shrink, they strategize." Sanai came over that evening with pizza and legal pads. "You ready to start planning the relaunch?" Naima smiled. "Of what?" "Of you, girl." Naima laughed. "I'm not launching, I'm living." Sanai grinned. "Then at least let me help you pick better lighting for the press interviews. You're eventually gonna say yes to." Naima shook her head. "No interviews." "Fine," Sanai said. "But when the world finally figures out what you've built without them looking, don't act surprised when they come running." Naima took a sip of her tea. "I won't run." That weekend, she returned to the same hotel Ellis had posed for his magazine cover in. This time, she didn't walk through the front lobby. She entered through the service elevator, took the back hallway, knocked once on the door of the event planner's office. The woman opened it and gasped. "Mrs. Carrington, I mean, Naima." Naima smiled. "I'm just here to say thank you. For the years you made us look good while doing everything behind the scenes." The planner blinked. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything. That's why I had to leave." Lesson embedded. Leaving isn't weakness. Leaving silently doesn't mean you weren't hurt. Sometimes it means you've learned the difference between fixing and wasting your time. That night, as the hotel lights dimmed and the city noise softened, Naima walked past the ballroom where she and Ellis once hosted their anniversary gala. No one noticed her. But she noticed herself, and for the first time in years, she liked what she saw. No ring, no shadows, no noise, just clarity. If you've ever walked away silently to protect your peace, type "chosen peace" in the comments. Like this video if you believe quiet exits can be the loudest form of power. Share this story with someone rebuilding their life in silence. And subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more stories that remind you dignity doesn't need an audience. Naima hadn't planned to attend the Monaco fundraiser. She ignored the first invitation, then the second. It wasn't until a handwritten note arrived, tucked inside an envelope bearing no logo, no return address, that she paused. It read, Stillness doesn't mean hiding. You are not what he did to you. We saved a seat for the woman who built more than she ever claimed. D.L. She read it 3 times. D.L. Dane Lorick. A name from a different chapter. Not romantic, but respectful. A man who once shook her hand like she mattered, even when she wasn't. To the keynote speaker, or the headline, or the face of the empire. That was 7 years ago. And yet, he remembered. Sunai raised her eyebrows when Naima mentioned the note. Dane Lorick, the quiet billionaire with the shipping fortune and the perfect jawline. Naima blinked. I wasn't aware his jawline had an investment fund. It should, Sunai muttered. What did he mean by stillness? Naima stared at the letter. I think he means I don't have to keep disappearing just because I left someone who didn't see me. She booked the flight. 1 seat. First class, not private. No entourage. No assistant. No press alert. The only person who knew was Sanai. And Sanai only packed her suitcase with elegance that says nothing but owns everything. Naima landed in Monaco under no fanfare. Just sea breeze and sunlight. A black car waited. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't flinch at being alone. The fundraiser was small by Billionaire standards, less than 70 people, hosted on a cliff-top estate overlooking the water. Naima arrived in a navy silk dress with long sleeves and no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back, her face bare but glowing. She wasn't trying to be seen. She was finally used to being with herself. Dane stood near the far edge of the balcony, speaking with a diplomat and a tech founder she vaguely recognized. When their eyes met, he didn't smile too wide, didn't wave like a man eager to prove familiarity. He simply nodded, and walked toward her with the kind of pace that said, I'm here, if you still want to be. Naima Carrington, he said. In a room full of volume, you still quiet everything. She raised an eyebrow. You remember 7 years ago? I remember who paid attention, even when no one was watching her. Naima tilted her head. You always spoke like that. I always meant what I said. They didn't flirt. They talked about funding models, about education in underserved communities, about the time a CEO tried to convince Dane to brand luxury yachts as floating innovation incubators. He laughed. She didn't. He said, that wasn't a joke. She replied, exactly. They both laughed then. And the tension melted. Not romantic tension, but the kind that exists between 2 people who finally stepped out of toxic rooms and into respectful ones. Later that evening, he approached her again. I know you've had cameras in your face for years. If you'd rather skip the dinner and sit somewhere with no lights, I can offer a yacht with neither. Naima blinked. That's an invitation. It's an option, Dane corrected. Space, silence, or sunlight. You can choose. She looked out at the water. Sunlight. He nodded once. We'll leave in 30 minutes. She didn't feel nervous. She felt weightless, as if being seen respectfully was far more disarming than being adored. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to explain herself. The yacht wasn't massive, not by billionaire standards, but it was tastefully quiet. The crew greeted her with a bow and offered no chatter. The table was set for 2. Just 2. Dane poured tea, not wine. And when he asked her a question, he waited for the full answer. Not to debate, not to fix, not to one-up, just to understand. As the sun lowered over the horizon, she sat barefoot beneath a linen canopy and stared at the soft orange glow hitting the water. She didn't speak for several minutes. Neither did Dane. And not once did the silence feel heavy. Lesson embedded. Sometimes healing doesn't come from therapy or closure or loud self-love mantras. Sometimes it comes from one moment where nobody needs anything from you. Not an image. Not an answer. Not applause. Just presence. Naima watched the lights flicker across the coast. She whispered to herself, I'm not in survival anymore. And Dane, without turning his head, said quietly, No, you're in return. Dane didn't ask personal questions. Not about the divorce. Not about Ellis. Not about headlines. And for that, Naima was grateful. Because questions that poked wounds weren't conversations. They were control tactics, and she'd had enough of those. Instead, Dane asked things like, "What time do you usually wake up when the world isn't watching? If peace was a room, what would it smell like? Which decisions in your life were made quietly but changed everything?" Naima answered each of them. Slowly. No need to perform. No need to prove. She didn't even realize she was smiling. They sat on the upper deck of the yacht as the sea rocked gently beneath them. She wrapped herself in a light shawl. Dane leaned against the railing, sipping his tea. "You're good at silence," he said. "I've practiced," she replied. "It shows." She looked at him. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an understanding." The moonlight hit the water like silver ribbon. In that light, Naima's face softened. She wasn't tired. She wasn't guarded. She was still, and in that stillness, something new stirred. Not attraction, not desire, not longing. It was possibility, the kind that didn't come with pressure, just air. They talked for hours, about things that mattered, about things that didn't. Naima told him about her father's study and the letter she found, about peppermint tea and why it calmed her more than champagne ever could. Dane listened, not nodding endlessly, not interrupting, just receiving. That kind of listening? It felt like respect, and respect, after chaos, felt like romance. He didn't try to touch her, didn't lean in, didn't test the space between them. Instead, he said, "Sometimes people need time to hear their own voice again. You sound like someone who just remembered the melody." She looked at him. "And what do I do with it?" "Play it for yourself. First. Then maybe let someone harmonize later." By midnight, she was ready to leave. Not because she was uncomfortable, but because she didn't need to stretch the moment for it to matter. Dane didn't protest. He walked her to the edge of the deck, helped her down onto the transport boat. Before she stepped away, he said, "If you ever want a space without questions, no stage, no noise, mine's open." Naima nodded. "Thank you," and meant it. Back at her hotel suite, she changed into cotton loungewear and pulled her journal from her bag. She wrote, "Tonight, I was not someone's wife. I was not someone's regret. I was not someone's branding tool. I was me." Then, she underlined it. Twice. The next morning, as she sipped her tea, a message came through. From Dane Lorick, subject, no response needed. "Your presence was steady. If you ever want sunlight, it will be waiting, without expectation." She didn't reply, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't need to say anything yet. That day, Naima attended one more Monaco panel. She didn't speak. She listened. She smiled at a young founder who tripped over her own pitch. Afterward, she handed the girl her card. "If you're ever in Chicago, I'll read your deck. No charge." The girl stammered, "Wait, are you Naima Carrington?" Naima smiled. "Not anymore. I'm just Naima." Later, as she packed her bag to leave, she received an alert. "Breaking: billionaire Ellis Granger spotted in Monaco, but all eyes are on his ex-wife." She didn't open the article. She didn't care. Because for the first time in a long time, the story wasn't about what she left behind. It was about where she was now. Lesson embedded. Stillness isn't what happens when the noise ends. Stillness is what you choose, when you're finally done trying to earn a seat at tables that only valued your silence. Naima walked to her window, watched the sun set over the French Riviera, and whispered, "I don't need to be heard anymore. I need to be understood." By me, Naima had left Monaco without promises. No exchanged phone numbers, no forced goodbyes, just presence. And that was enough, for now. Back in Chicago, headlines speculated. Photos surfaced of her boarding a yacht. Whispers tied her name to Dane Lorick with predictable headlines. "Billionaire beauty finds peace in Monaco from power couple to power solo. Naima Carrington, silent no more." She ignored them all. She was no longer in the business of correcting the record. She was rewriting her own. Days passed quietly. She returned to her lake house, handled logistics, signed new investment deals, spoke at a school in Southside Chicago without press. Then, One morning, she opened her inbox. No subject, no greeting, just, "Chicago has sunlight too. Dinner on the lake?" Signed, Dane. She smiled, not because it was romantic, but because it wasn't demanding. She replied with 2 words, "Yes." Thursday arrived without fanfare. She wore a white dress, simple cotton, sleeveless, no frills, hair pinned up, barefaced except for a soft gloss. The dinner wasn't on a rooftop. It wasn't in a penthouse. It was on a restored sailboat, anchored at a private dock near Lake Michigan. A chef she didn't recognize greeted her. Dane stood near the table, which was set with candles, linen, and, again, tea instead of wine. No music. No cameras. No one else. He smiled. "I'm glad you came. I almost didn't." "Why not?" "Because I don't trust stillness yet." He pulled out her chair. "Then let's give it a job." They ate quietly at first. Grilled fish, saffron rice, fresh mango slices. Then conversation began. Not surface questions, not performative curiosity, just real things. What did your father believe in most? What do you wish someone told you at 25? Where do you go in your mind when everything around you breaks? Naima answered without flinching. He believed in working early and forgiving late. "I wish someone told me love doesn't owe you safety if it's built on performance. I go to the lake house, even when I can't be there physically." Dane listened, and when it was his turn, he answered too. "My mother believed silence is how men hide their weaknesses. I wish someone told me legacy means nothing if no one wants to inherit your values. I go to sea, always have. It reminds me how small we all are, and how peaceful that can be." After dinner, they sat with their tea. The wind was soft, brushing her shoulders gently. Naima looked out at the water and said, "Ellis never asked questions, he just assumed, about everything. Most people mistake assuming for understanding, and most people settle," she added. "Did you?" Naima didn't rush the answer. "I settled for being useful, because I thought it meant I mattered." Dane sipped his tea. "You still think that?" "Not anymore. But I'm still learning how not to measure my worth by what I fix." The sky turned deep blue. The candles flickered. Then Dane said something unexpected. "I didn't invite you here for anything more than what this is. I'm not trying to fill anyone's shoes. I'm not trying to show you better." She turned to him. "Then why did you invite me?" "Because peace deserves witnesses too. Not just your pain." That sentence settled into her chest like truth. She blinked. Once, twice, and smiled. Not wide, but full. They didn't hold hands. They didn't lean in. They just stayed seated as the moon climbed higher, sipping tea, letting the evening breathe. Naima closed her eyes for a moment, listened to the wind, her heartbeat, the quiet between two people who didn't owe each other anything, but chose to show up anyway. Lesson embedded. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's one dinner where no one interrupts you. One night where no one wants anything from you. One person who doesn't see you as potential, but as presence. When it was time to go, Dane stood, helped her off the boat and said, "You don't owe me anything." She replied, "I know." He smiled. "And that's why I'm still here." She drove home with the windows down. No music, no calls, just wind and thought and breath. And somewhere deep in her chest, a new kind of feeling grew. Not love, not lust, but safety. Naima didn't tell Sanai about the dinner until 2 days later. They were walking through a farmer's market near the lake, woven baskets in hand, trading bites of sliced peaches and homemade bread. Sanai asked, "So, are you dating the yacht guy?" Naima gave her a look. "You make it sound like he's in a cologne commercial. Isn't he?" Naima rolled her eyes. "We had dinner. In Monaco, in Chicago." Sanai stopped walking. "Wait, again?" Naima nodded. "It wasn't a date." Sanai raised a brow. "Was there a table?" "Yes." "Candles?" "Yes." Silence that wasn't awkward. Naima sighed. "Sanai, you're dating him." Naima cracked a smile. We talked. That's worse. You trust him. Later that night, Naima thought about that conversation. She didn't know what to call this thing between her and Dane, but she knew it wasn't rebound. And it wasn't retreat. It felt like pause, like the moment just before a deep breath. She sat on the back porch with her tea and journal, thinking about the difference between being admired and being understood. Ellis had admired her loyalty, her resilience, her genius, until it made him feel small. But Dane? He didn't call her strong, he called her present, and that made her feel real again. 3 days after the dinner, a package arrived. No name, no sender. Inside was a small wooden box. A note was attached. No pressure, no expectation, just a piece of calm if you ever want to remember. DL. Inside the box was a compass, hand-carved. At the center, engraved, peace is a direction, not a destination. Naima didn't cry, but she did hold it in her hand longer than expected. She placed it on her bookshelf, between her father's favorite journal and a photo of her at age 7, smiling on a fishing dock. That evening, she emailed Dane. I don't need stillness. I've become it. But thank you for not trying to fix what wasn't broken. Tea on Tuesday? He replied within 10 minutes. My dock. 6 p.m. No candles. Just sky. Tuesday came with a soft breeze. She wore jeans and a linen blouse. Barefoot. Hair loose. He met her with 2 cups of tea and no questions. They sat on the dock. No yacht this time. Just planks, water and time. They talked about everything except their pasts, not because they were avoiding, but because this moment didn't belong to history. She asked, "Why tea?" He replied, "Wine asks for conversation. Tea waits for connection." She tilted her head. "That sounds rehearsed." He grinned. "I practiced it on a monk in Nepal." She laughed. "What did he say?" He said I should talk less and pour better. The sun dipped low. Their conversation slowed. Then he asked, "What are you building now, Naima?" She took a deep breath. "A life that doesn't shrink me, a legacy that doesn't need my face on it, and a love, if it ever comes again, that's quiet, steady." "Sure." Dane nodded. "I hope I get to see it, even from across the lake." She looked at him. "You already are." They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But when she left, he didn't watch her go. He trusted she'd return if and when it was meant. And she did. Not the next day. Not the one after. But one evening, just before the rain came, she returned to that same dock. With 2 cups of tea, lesson embedded. Sometimes love doesn't knock. It sits quietly near the water. It doesn't interrupt your healing. It doesn't demand a title. It shows up, and it waits, without needing to be picked. As the first drops of rain hit the lake, Naima whispered, "I never knew peace could look like this." And Dane replied, gently, "It's looked like you all along." Ellis wasn't supposed to be in Monaco, but the assistant, now officially his girlfriend, wanted pictures. She'd seen the articles, the speculation, the quiet chatter about Naima reclaiming her power and stepping into her next chapter. Ellis didn't like it, not because he missed Naima, but because her silence was louder than his presence. And no matter how hard he tried to reclaim attention, she remained the story. So when the invite to the same global summit came, he didn't hesitate. He flew in on a chartered jet, reserved the most visible table, showed up to the welcome gala in a tailored white tux, and when he arrived, the cameras turned. But they weren't looking at him. Naima hadn't planned to attend the gala. She wasn't interested in headlines. But Dane had whispered, "This room changes funding for 2 entire continents. You don't have to talk. You just have to be seen." And so, she showed up, not to prove a point, but to stand in the light she no longer had to ask permission to touch. She wore navy, not sequins, not a dramatic slit, just structure and simplicity. No earrings, no clutch, no statement necklace. Her presence was the statement. Ellis saw her from across the room, laughter wrapped around her like silk. Conversations slowed when she passed. People angled themselves to speak with her. She was poised, still, quiet. And yet, she pulled gravity. He froze. The assistant whispered, "Isn't that—" "Yes," Ellis said, voice low. Naima hadn't noticed him. Or maybe she had. She just hadn't cared. Then came the moment he couldn't unsee. She stepped onto a private transport boat with Dane Lorick, smiling faintly. No touch. No kiss. Just warmth. The kind of warmth Ellis hadn't felt in years. He turned away, jaw tight. And for the first time in months, he realized something terrifying. Naima hadn't moved on. She'd elevated. The assistant tugged his arm. "Want a drink?" He didn't answer. His mind was stuck on that navy dress, that peace, that effortless glow. He suddenly hated his tux, hated the cameras, hated the noise, because all the sound in the world couldn't drown out the silence of losing a woman who no longer needed to explain her absence. Naima, meanwhile, sat on the yacht deck with her tea. Dane spoke about infrastructure funding in West Africa. She listened, asked questions, added insight. But halfway through the conversation, he stopped. "You've been quiet." She sipped her tea. He was there. Dane nodded. "I figured. I didn't feel anything. Isn't that strange?" "No," he said. "That's called healing." She paused. "I didn't even flinch. You didn't leave to hurt him. You left to return to yourself. That's different." As the yacht glided across the water, Naima closed her eyes and let the air hit her skin. She didn't need closure. She didn't want revenge. What she had now was freedom, lesson embedded. The moment you no longer need someone to notice you is the moment you've won a battle they don't even know they lost. Naima didn't speak of Ellis again that night, and Dane didn't ask, because peace doesn't need context. It just needs room. Back on shore, Ellis stood alone near the valet line. The assistant was chatting up a celebrity in too much bronzer. He watched the waves. He remembered that lake house, that peppermint tea, that woman who used to finish his sentences, and for the first time, he missed her. Not the role she played, not the image she helped build, but her. And it was too late. Ellis didn't sleep that night. Back at his hotel suite, the assistant tried to distract him. Wine. A new watch she'd picked up earlier, playful digs about Naima's simple dress. But he wasn't listening, because simplicity had never looked so untouchable. And the woman who once walked 3 steps behind him now had an entire room reorienting just to be near her. He scrolled through old photos on his phone, ones he thought he'd deleted. Naima in sweatpants at their first property, reviewing floor plans. Naima on the lake, barefoot with wind in her curls. Naima reading contracts on the floor because the table hadn't been delivered yet. Photos where she wasn't performing. She was building, and he had built on top of her, until she stepped out from underneath him. Back on Dane's yacht, Naima stood alone near the railing. Dane gave her space, as he always did. She stared out at the coastline, lights flickering, people laughing in places she no longer needed to be. Her phone buzzed once. "Ellis, you looked peaceful tonight. I hope you are." She didn't respond, not out of spite, but because it wasn't her job to hold space for his realization. She slipped her phone back into her clutch and whispered to the waves, "I am." The next morning, Ellis checked the news. Photos of Naima and Dane, graceful, distant, effortless. No scandal, no touch, no gossip bait. But the message was clear. She wasn't trying to make him jealous. She had simply outgrown the version of her that needed him. He stared at the screen, numb. The assistant walked in wearing one of his shirts. "You hungry?" He shook his head. She pouted. "You've been weird since the party. I thought this trip was about us." Ellis stood, buttoned his jacket, and said without looking at her, "This trip reminded me of everything I lost." Meanwhile, Naima returned to the lake house. The moment her feet touched the porch, she breathed deeper. She poured herself tea and journaled without music. And when Sanai called asking for a recap, Naima said only one thing. I didn't need to say a word. And that was the power. That evening, a bouquet arrived. No name on the card. Just 3 words, I see you. She placed it in the kitchen. Didn't wonder, didn't speculate, because it didn't matter who saw her now. She saw herself. Later, Dane texted, Dane, lunch next week? You pick the silence level. Naima, medium. Tea, mandatory. No yachts. Dane, deal. Lesson embedded. Sometimes the most powerful chapter of your life is the one where you say nothing. You just live, and let your peace do all the talking. Ellis never tried again. He wouldn't dare. Not because she blocked him, but because even he knew. She was gone, and no apology could reach the woman who didn't need him to say a thing. Naima didn't rebuild her life. She redirected it, not for applause, not for revenge, but for purpose. After Monaco, she returned to Chicago with clarity, not closure, not fireworks, just a calm decision that her name would no longer sit quietly behind anyone else's. She withdrew from the remaining board seats Ellis had used for press leverage. She gave up her honorary titles. She declined 2 speaking invitations with 5-figure honorariums. Instead, she launched an anonymous grant program through the Carrington Quiet Growth Fund. No name plaques, no social posts, just funding and results. In 6 months, 11 single mothers launched service-based businesses. 4 formerly incarcerated women received full tuition for certification programs. 2 small community-led tech startups went national. No interviews, no photo ops, just lives changed, quietly. Sanai called it a soft revolution. Naima called it repair. I'm not making noise anymore, she told her. I'm creating balance. One afternoon, she visited a high school on the south side to sit in on a mentorship roundtable. The girls didn't recognize her. They asked real questions. How do I stop shrinking in rooms full of men? How do I say no without being labeled difficult? How do I ask for more without sounding ungrateful? Naima didn't answer right away. She let them speak. Cry. Dream out loud. Then she simply said, every room you walk into is a mirror. If you keep shrinking, you teach them what you look like small. They wrote that down like scripture. After the session, a girl tapped her shoulder. Miss Naima, were you married to that hotel guy? Naima paused. I was. The girl hesitated. Why'd you leave? Naima replied without hesitation. Because I deserved to be in the room, not just help build it. Word spread, quietly, through the right circles. She became the woman people called when they wanted truth, not headlines. A consulting firm for underrepresented founders invited her to be an advisor. She accepted. A former rival offered to buy her out of a shared asset. She declined. Meanwhile, Ellis's empire started to crack. Subtle at first. A deal fell through in Dubai. A silent partner exited without warning. Staff turnover increased. And worst of all, his new girlfriend didn't understand the business. She understood the optics, but not the grind. And when he needed solutions, she offered hashtags. One night, during a board meeting, he pitched a rebrand, called it Legacy Evolved. The CFO, one of the few who had worked with Naima, shut it down. Legacy can't evolve until it was solid to begin with. Ellis didn't argue. He just felt tired and, strangely, alone. Naima, on the other hand, was not alone. Her circle was small, intentional, brilliant. She met with a retired city planner about building transitional housing for women exiting shelters. She co-funded a youth art program in her late father's neighborhood, and she started offering office hours once a week for any woman launching her first pitch. No gatekeeping, no filters, no name tags, just chairs and trust. Dane visited once a week. No agenda, sometimes with books, sometimes with tea, always with patience. They didn't discuss love, or next steps, or labels. They just were, and that was enough. One night, he asked, "Do you ever miss it, the old life?" Naima thought for a moment. "I miss parts. I miss who I was before I forgot my name in someone else's vision. He nodded. You remember now? I do, she whispered. And would you ever give it away again? She looked him in the eye. Never. Lesson embedded. Purpose isn't always loud. It's consistent. It's strategic. And it doesn't beg to be seen. It creates impact whether anyone's watching or not. As fall rolled in, Naima stood on the porch of her new home, coffee in hand, plan in motion. The past no longer tugged at her. The future no longer frightened her. She was where she needed to be. And that was the point all along. Naima had always been powerful. But now, she was intentional. That difference changed everything. Each Monday morning she woke without alarms. No meetings packed wall to wall. No pressure to perform for headlines. No forced smiles at corporate brunches. Instead, she journaled, she planned, she brewed her tea. And by noon, she was fully engaged with the things that mattered. Her new office space wasn't on the 34th floor of a steel building. It was on the second floor of a restored brick walk-up in Bronzeville. No marble, no gold logos, just wood, books, light, and a table with enough seats for 6 women at a time. Founders, mothers, artists, students. They came to learn, pitch, and receive. Naima called them her builders. They called her Ground Zero. One of the younger women, Maya, said during a group session, "You're the first person who didn't ask for my numbers before hearing my dream." Naima replied, "Your dream is the number. You'll get the rest." Maya wept. So did 2 others. Outside that room, the world still whispered. Paparazzi still tried to catch her on the street. Blogs still speculated about her mystery man. Magazines tried to make her the face of reinvention. She declined every cover. One outlet offered a blank check for her exclusive story. She wrote back one line, "My silence is the story, and it's not for sale." Sanai loved to joke that Naima had become a myth. You've got people in these streets acting like you disappeared into the clouds. Meanwhile, you're changing bank accounts and baby futures. Naima laughed. Let them wonder. Girl, at this point, you could start a movement. Naima sipped her tea. I already did. They just don't know what to call it yet. Ellis tried one more time. Indirectly. A mutual friend sent word that he wanted to meet for lunch. No agenda. Just a conversation. Naima's response was short. Tell him I'm busy. Forever. That same day, a woman from Naima's past reached out. A former front desk clerk at one of the first hotels they opened together. She was now managing 3 properties of her own and wanted to license one of Naima's operating systems. Naima invited her to the office. They cried. They laughed. They signed the agreement with music playing in the background. No suits, no lawyers. Just trust and mutual respect. Later that evening, Dane arrived with groceries. He cooked. She lit the candles. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't discuss the future. They existed in the now. At the table, she looked at him and said softly, I never thought I'd get to live this gently. He replied, You were always meant to. They cleaned the kitchen together like they'd done it 100 times. When he left, he didn't ask for plans. He simply said, Whenever you want stillness again, I'm where the quiet is. And she kissed his cheek. Nothing more, nothing less. Lesson embedded. Wholeness is quiet. It doesn't ask to be validated. It doesn't chase what walked away. It builds. And then it opens the door for others to do the same. As winter neared, Naima updated the mission statement on her Grant Foundation's homepage. She kept it short. We are not here to be seen. We are here to see those who have been overlooked and help them build, quietly, strategically, permanently. She reread the words one more time, then clicked publish. And just like that, the new chapter wasn't coming. It had already begun. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The air was crisp. The leaves had begun turning amber around the lake. Naima sat in her kitchen wearing an old sweater that belonged to her father, holding a cup of chamomile tea. No makeup. No performance. Just realness. Her phone buzzed once. Dane, you home? I've got something that can't be emailed. She smiled. Naima. Doors open. No shoes. He arrived 10 minutes later. Jeans. Wool coat. A quiet smile. He carried a brown envelope and 2 lemon shortbreads from her favorite bakery. I remembered, he said, holding them up. You always do, she replied. They sat on the back porch as the wind rustled the trees. Dane handed her the envelope. What's this? No pressure, just an idea, and a choice. Inside was a proposal, not a business one, but personal, a partnership, not in romance, but in purpose. He wanted to co-fund a transitional housing facility for women leaving emotionally abusive relationships, one that would offer not just shelter, but career readiness, emotional therapy, legal support, and startup grants. Naima read each line. He had included everything: projected costs, staffing needs, property options, even notes in the margins where he'd guessed how she might improve it. She looked up. You've been paying attention, he nodded. Only to what matters. She set the file down, her voice low. Why me? Because you're already doing it, Dane said. But now you won't be doing it alone. Naima leaned back in her chair. You're not trying to impress me, are you? Dane shook his head. Naima, I'm not trying to own you. I'm trying to walk beside you, if you'll let me. She blinked. That word again. Beside, not above. Not behind, not beneath. Beside. There was no ring, no proposal, no kiss. But what Dane gave her that day was deeper. He gave her a present, a space where she could exist, build, grow, and still remain herself. She took a breath, then said quietly, yes, not to the project, to the energy, to the partnership, to the man who offered presence instead of possession. They spent the rest of the afternoon sketching ideas on napkins. Who would run the mental health programming? What the bedrooms would feel like? How meals would be structured? How they'd hire staff who had also been through it? Naima said, it needs a name. Dane replied, you'll know when it's right. She looked out over the lake and whispered, Rise Quiet. He smiled. Perfect. That night, she walked Dane to the door. He didn't kiss her. He just looked at her and said, You don't have to prove anything to me. She answered, I know. And that's why you're here. After he left, she curled up on the couch, blanket around her, staring at the envelope. It wasn't about the project. It was about the mirror. Dane didn't offer a pedestal. He offered a reflection of the woman she'd fought to become. Lesson embedded. Real love doesn't require proof. It doesn't chase. It doesn't demand. It asks, can I sit with you here, even if this is all it ever is? And if the answer is yes, that's enough. Naima stood, walked to her desk, and began drafting the official grant document for Rise Quiet. She didn't need Ellis. She didn't need revenge. She didn't even need praise. She had direction. And she had someone who didn't want to change her stride, only walk in rhythm with it. The launch of Rise Quiet was intentionally unannounced. No press, no branded gala, no influencers or camera crews, just women, showing up, being seen, being supported. Naima stood at the front door of the facility as the first 3 residents arrived. Each one carried more trauma than luggage. Each one expected judgment or rules or a system that would ask them to beg. Instead, they were greeted by warmth, soft lighting, a shelf full of books, a counselor who said, take your time, and a woman named Naima who didn't wear a title, just a hoodie, flats, and the calm voice of someone who had nothing left to prove. One of the residents, Cassandra, approached her the second day. You own this place? Naima replied, I helped build it, but it belongs to you now too. Cassandra squinted. You don't act rich. Naima smiled. Peace looks different than money. In the evenings, Naima sat on the facility's back porch, reviewing progress charts and intake plans. Dane would join her sometimes, bringing tea and quiet company. He never stayed too long, never lingered for praise, never interrupted her rhythm. He just offered space. One evening, as fall settled in and the air turned sharper, Naima asked him, "Why didn't you ever ask me for more?" Dane took a long sip of his tea before answering, "Because what you give freely means more than anything I could ask for." She nodded slowly, and in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't about falling in love. It was about choosing peace in the form of someone who didn't make healing feel like a favor. Later that week, Sanai visited the facility. She sat with Naima in the empty group room and looked around. "Do you realize you built the exact opposite of Ellis?" Naima raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" He wanted everyone to clap. "You're building rooms where women finally exhale. No performance. Just breath." Naima smiled. "Then I've done it right." On the first Sunday of the month, Naima held a journaling session with the residents. She didn't lead it like a CEO. She sat on the floor, crossed her legs and said, "Write the version of yourself that doesn't ask for permission." The room went quiet. Pens moved. Some tears came, but no one looked away. Afterward, Cassandra handed her a folded sheet of paper. Naima unfolded it hours later. At the top, it said, "She no longer waits to be picked. She builds the stage and invites herself." Naima wept, not loudly, just once, and it was enough. Lesson embedded: healing doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it looks like building a room you once needed, and holding the door open for someone else. As winter rolled in, Naima sat by the fire in her home and drafted her year-end reflection. She wrote, "I didn't end the year married. I didn't end it broken. I ended it whole, present, with no one trying to possess me, and someone offering presence instead. That is the life I always deserved." She signed it with her full name, not because anyone would see it, but because she saw herself now, clearly, and she liked who she'd become. Across town, Dane received a message. "Naima, you were right. Peace was waiting. I just had to stop running from stillness." Dane, then stillness is honored to have you. To our loyal listeners, if you've made it this far, thank you for staying with us through every moment of Naima's quiet strength, her heartbreak, and her rediscovery of peace. Now, let's pause and ask, have you ever stayed silent? Not because you were weak, but because you were done explaining your worth. Have you ever chosen peace over proving a point? Then you understand her journey. This story wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about showing off. It was about what happens when a woman remembers she was never lost. She was buried under someone else's noise. And when she stood up, the world had no choice but to watch her rise. Life lessons. What did this story teach you about self-worth, healing, or love? Have you ever walked away from someone who never truly saw you? Let's talk about it in the comments. Someone out there needs your story too. If this story moved you, like this video, leave a comment below. Share it with someone silently rebuilding themselves, and don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more powerful, life-filled narratives like this. Because around here, stories don't just entertain, they heal, uplift, and remind you of who you've always been. Until next time, choose peace, stay grounded, and never wait for permission to rise.